Welcome to a journey, a story to be told, where lives and hearts unfold. It's more than just a label, it's our identity. Breaking free, discovering who we're meant to be. Beyond the binary, we shine so bright. With every step we're taking flight. In every voice, a truth to find. Beyond the binary, we're redefining life. So tune in and join the ride. With love and pride, we're side by side. Beyond the binary, together we'll see the beauty in our diversity. Join the ride with love and pride. We're side by side beyond the binary. Together we'll see the beauty in our diversity. Yeah. The beauty in our diversity.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Binary. I'm your host Julie, and as always I'm here with my fantastic co-host Chloe. How are you doing today, Chloe?
Hi Julie, I'm doing great, thank you. I'm really excited about today's episode because we're diving into some of the emotional and psychological aspects of being transgender. This is such an important topic and I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely, and today we're here with a special guest, Chenko, a Twitch streamer who also studied psychology. Chenko, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, it's great having you here. Your insights as a psychology students will be very important to this conversation. Like, you have no clue how much this means having you here, because like we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts about every step we're doing along this way, because your insights will help us guide the way, if you get what I mean.
Of course, yeah. I think I get what you mean. I mean, I'm taking a bachelor in psychology, so it's more like a basic psychology, if you can call it that. But I also have some experience working like in the field with patients, where one of them were transgender. So maybe we can talk a little bit about.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you're studying, you're studying currently or?
Yes, I'm studying currently.
Oh, how fascinating.
Thank you.
That's really cool. And you said you have experience already, so you're going to add to this conversation so much. I often feel like as co-host, I'm learning so much from Julie, so it'd be really, really interesting to get insight from yourself as well. Julie, from your own experience, can you explain what some of the emotional challenges are in terms of what we're going to be discussing today? And then, Jenko, if you wouldn't mind hopping on that conversation.
Of course.
Well, as you might know or might not know, coming out as transgender is already very emotional roller coaster. Because like we discussed previous episodes, like coming out, you can lose so much from it. You can gain from it, but at the same time, you never really know what side the coin flips. So it's always a mix, because the fear, the anxiety, the moments of doubts where you don't know really what will happen, if you get what I mean. So it is the complexity of the human being that makes it hard for people to come out, because the emotions. But then they do have to realize that if you really want to be happy, you have to do it eventually, you know.
Yeah, if I can add something,
Yeah.
that is something I've been reflecting on as well, because I don't have any experience with that myself, but what I can imagine is that you are doing this to get a better, or like into a better emotional state, which is kind of unique in a way, which I find so fascinating. In psychology, whenever we try to dig into something like that, we tend to use something called the biopsychosocial model.
Gosh.
Quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
But we kind of start thinking thinking of like how the body reacts to a change, and also how your emotions react, and also how you're met socially. And especially in this situation, I know there's a lot to like dig into, like how if you decide to take hormones, like how your body reacts to that, and like you're talking about how like if hmm, how you're saying that it feels that you're kind of scared in a way. And I know some people struggle a lot with anxiety when coming out. Um, but also how, like I said, how you're met socially, not just family, but also in like a healthcare system. Um, yeah, which I can see is super difficult.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean. Like, coming out is already scary, not only for family, but also like your friends, your environment. Like, in my case, like, I lost more than 50% of the people I knew just because I came out. So, the fear I had there, the anxiety of being lonely, being alone, was enhanced by the fact that people just dropped me like that because I wanted to be myself. So I wanted to become happier and get into a better emotional states. But at the same time, I got pushed down by the fact that everyone dropped me, which is, like I said, again, a coin flip. But the thing is, you do have to do it, go through it if you want to get into a better state. And sure, you spoke about hormones. I can tell you, they make people so emotional. Like, I used to be somebody who never cried before. Now, I cry for the dumbest things. Like, I see somebody fall. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I'll laugh. Depends on which part of the day we are. But, like, I've never cried as much as I do now, you know?
Yes.
How would you handle that, Chenko, going from such a different state of being to having all of these sudden emotions? From your background, how would you recommend people navigate that? And as well as that, the family around them, how to communicate that you're going through a different time right now and you might be feeling a bit more susceptible to these kinds of emotions?
Oh yeah, that is a difficult question because I know it's very individually. Um, and I know that this is probably not super easy for everyone. But I would say that a social um, approach would probably be the best thing to like get people that you actually trust. And like you don't have to explain a lot. Just I would just say having people that you trust, even though that's not the easiest thing for everyone. Um, and, I don't know if you guys have seen support groups. Sometimes I think it's important to not give advice, like for people around. I think for the people that are coming out, maybe it's better for them to tell everyone how it is to come out and get support in that way instead of having someone to give you advice. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, support, social support, I think is the most efficient thing.
No, I do get that because, well, in the beginning I did look for support groups, but you gotta see it like this. Support groups for transgenders often talk about them being hurt by people that aren't transgender because, well,
Mm.
gender dysphoria, people are still not really understanding what it is, so they don't really know how to cope with it. So the support groups I joined were like the negative ones that were talking about how cisgenders were not the best people to be around with. And out of my own experience, I know that that's not true. Like, I've talked before that some people have actually saved my life before, and those people weren't transgender. Like, I got a good connection with some people that I wouldn't change for a single thing. So a support group can be good, but at the same time, you gotta keep in mind that not every support group is there really to support, but to push like something else through.
Mm.
So you need to find the correct support group in order to like find the correct way, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if this is something you can relate to, but something I've observed is that people tend to um, get internet communities instead of like in real life social communities. Is that something you can relate to?
Well, I've tried both. So internet communities are the easiest, but then within those internet communities you often have gatekeepers, so they kind of want to filter people out. Not everyone is allowed. You need to be do check the box. In my opinion, you don't in life you don't check boxes. If you really want to proceed to the next level, you just find a way to deal with stuff. You learn about the stuff. If you then still don't get it, you can still always ask people. When it comes to IRL communities, they kind of scare me because like you're in a group with 10 people, sometimes even more, and they talk about their stories, but none of them are actually always listening to what you're saying. So can you really progress in that way if you aren't listened to? That's something I really don't know.
That, and I suppose, as an introvert myself, support groups, that might be quite daunting for someone going through such a turbulent time. And as you say, Chenko, it might be helpful to seek out that kind of support online so that you feel like you're in a more secure space and you can reach out on your terms, and there's, as you say, there can be so much support online. And I mean, just this community, I mean, beyond the binary, is going to help so many people. And we urged people in the last episode to, reach out if you need someone to talk to. And that could always just be the first step, just having someone there. It may not be a professional support group, but it may be people that you trust and you can rely on to speak to.
Absolutely. I think so. Mm,
I think Chloe might actually be right. Having somebody there could also be important value. Like, it doesn't have to be professional. Like, I was never listened to. So I met people online on Twitch that could actually help me in other ways. They listened to me, they were there when I needed them, instead of having to rely on people who are also transitioning but don't listen. So you feel like you're not cared about, in a way. So for me, it did help having at least one or two people who actually listened. Like they weren't in the same situation, but the fact that there's somebody listening to you actually helped me a lot.
I think the impact of empathy on a person is wildly underestimated. Just having someone there that understands, or even not understands, but is willing to try and figure out a place where you can feel comfortable enough to share your story and feel better about yourself. Julie, were there any specific strategies or practices that helped you manage the emotional ups and downs during your transition, such as therapy? We've already spoken about reaching out to people, but there was anything else that you tried?
Well, as you come out as transgender, you get a psychologist assigned to you. You have to
Mm-hmm.
go to them like on a scheduled base. But the issue for me is like, if I don't trust a person, how can I talk open to that person? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where it all starts. You need to trust the person to get a connection with the person, so you really open up to that person, if that makes any sense. So for me, or it felt like I had to do it most of the times alone, professionally. Like look up online, talk to online people, online therapists, and all that stuff to help me emotionally. But like, there's so many other ways that people could actually cope with coming out or being transgender. And maybe Chenko can share some of her practices or coping mechanisms that she learned during her studies that could actually maybe help people.
Oh wow. Honestly, in my bachelor, we have not really been talking a lot about being transsexual, like at all, which kind of amazes me. Um, so, but I have some insights when it comes to how we meet people, or like when I were in like working in psychiatry, how we meet people as like as a healthcare provider. Um, and but my experience is that we don't really that much about being transgender. Maybe that was just the one case. But we try to like figure out how, like we try to dig into the emotion, the patient, instead of talking about being transgender in general. I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but in this case, that was what we did. Um, I don't know how you feel about that, Lee. Like how I was just wondering how, like you said, you were meeting psychologists mostly online. How do you feel like you were met by them, and what did you focus on?
Well, I did meet some IRL and online, and you just get a cold feeling, you know. When it's the IRL one, you enter like this office, and he's like, "Oh, how was your day?" Like he's just not really asking how you're doing. He's just stirring around the pot, if you get what I mean there.
Mm.
Not really asking how have you been, how was your transitioning, la di da di da. He just basically is asking how you're today. Well, you don't see each other for like 3, 6 months, or even a year sometimes. Like so much happens during the year, 6 months. So for me, I cannot trust somebody who only asks for today, and you have to pay for when they only ask how are you today. Like, because therapy isn't the cheapest thing you can do. Online therapy is often cheaper, but also there, they before they actually can help you, you need to rely on them that they will not spread your information and that they are truthful, because you never really know who you have on the other side online. So when it comes to online, for me it also felt cold because you kind of fill in a survey, or that's at least how I experienced it. They keep asking the same questions, each and every one of them, to try to get to know you, but then in the end, they don't really know you, or then they say they can't really help you because they haven't dealt with the situation before. So for me, it didn't really have any beneficial facts, you know?
Yeah, I can totally see that, and that is kind of just you're kind of saying the same thing as me as a health. Oh, one second, healthcare provider, that we are not really dealing with this stuff a lot, which we should because it happens. Um, that is some very interesting information that we should really have this subject more in school.
Yeah, no, I would agree. We were only talking about this in the last episode, and how there just isn't really a lot of medical understanding of the psychological needs of trans people, and how it's just not in the syllabus. We can't complain too much because I mean, women were only included in the syllabus very recently, let alone, everything else that comes with being a woman, including the trans experience. So hopefully with time, and now that they're, sort of broaching that side of the medical spectrum, that we can get a bit more support for people that really need it. Therapy, from what I understand, is addressing your problems and getting that human approach. Like you said, Chenko, when you approached this particular patient, it was about trying to commit them with a human approach rather than first addressing what's the problem. Which I think probably is what Julie's missing here, is that how are you and how are you doing, and that human connection. Is that, do you feel that's right, Julie, or do you think there's something else missing as well as the knowledge and that warmth from people?
I mean, asking how you were today is a good thing, but it's not something a therapist should ask that you're regularly seeing. Especially since, like, I could ask you, how are you doing today? Because at least we're friends, so, and we talk a bit more than me and my therapist. Like, I find when a therapist asks you, how are you today? And not like, how have you been since the last time we have spoken? That's already a way different approach, because then at least you can talk more openly about what has happened between then and now. If you ask, how are you today? And then I'm like, you don't really care about what happened in between last time and now. Like, this is a therapist we're going to, like, psychologist. This is not a friend you're seeing. Like, I'm paying money so you listen and help me where I need help. I'm not paying you to try to be my friend. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, and I mean, you found better support, I feel, from the online communities. How did you go about finding the communities that really did understand your experience and sort of transferred your experience of support from maybe a negative one to potentially a more positive one?
Well, most of the communities I found were non-transgender communities. Take, for example, like I said before, Chenko is a Twitch streamer. I absolutely love her community. There are some trolls there, but that's in every community, and I think Chenko can confirm there are some trolls. But those communities, like Chenko's or Gabby's, have such genuine people and nice people that are willing to help you if you really need help, Like, you could see it like the wolf that cried for help. If you're like that, then of course people would be like, no, it's hard. But like, in communities like that, when you really need help, I know there's always people that will help in case you need it. And that's why I really like, for example, the community that Janko made. I think Janko can confirm her community contains a lot of amazing people.
I'm so happy you're saying that, by the way. That makes me happy. And something I have been figuring, or like observed in online communities as well, is that you don't really have to tell them a lot about how you're doing. You're just having a great time. And sometimes sometimes that can be enough, at least for me when I'm having a bad day. Like booting up a game of golf with friends, that would be that would be kind of enough if I'm having a bad day. And sometimes, yeah, friends, your chosen family, maybe that is the best social interaction to reach out to.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. I love Twitch communities and the support they can provide. And as one of my fondest memories is me and Julie playing pretty much every, I think it was Wednesdays, was it? We settled on, and just getting together and just leaving all your worldly problems behind. And just having a good time, just having a good experience. And then, you can go back to reality afterwards, but just for those moments, you're just friends and you're just having a good time. Jenko, as a streamer yourself, what steps would you recommend to people in terms of connecting with others, building networks, and making those friendships where you can have that time to switch off and just be yourself?
Do you mean like while being live, or like a stream?
Well, in any respect, really, like finding new communities and communicating via chat or with new streamers. Like, what would you recommend would be the best approach?
Mm, like for my community, I try to be as authentic as I can, even though that can be difficult. Like something I need to remind myself of is that we are entertainers on Twitch, and I have decided to make a Discord group as well, which has worked surprisingly well, and people seem to get along, and that is awesome. But something I need to try to pay attention to is how much and also how much people too, because there's something called trauma dumping that I'm an empath, and that is something I need to have a little bit of a clear boundary on. I love to hear how everyone is feeling, and if they feel safe telling their stuff to me, and also being on this podcast, um, I take that as a huge thing. But it's also like a line between saying too much, and also when it comes to new people on Twitch, like I know that you like when you see a friendly face on Twitch and you're not having a great day, it's so easy to like maybe say a little bit too much, and then the streamer won't be sure how to react, and that can be, I'm sure that can be super difficult for both ends. But yeah, we have a safe space, and or like there's a lot of communities that has a safe space, and also online you meet a lot of different people, which can mean that there's more tolerance, I guess. Like speaking of online communities.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Like, trauma dumping should not be done via Twitch when people are streaming. If you really want to trauma dump, I do believe you could see like real therapists or stuff. But you, as a student of psychology, would you recommend people to actually go to psychologist for this kind of stuff, or would you rather be like use internet therapists to see what they can do? Because there is a difference between going to a therapist and then online therapist, right?
Absolutely. I don't have an experience with online therapy myself. But I also kind of feel like how much of a problem it is, as an emotional, a social problem it is to come out as a trans. If you really need therapy, maybe someone doesn't. So that is, I feel like that is kind of individual in a way. Maybe both. Something it's kind of another subject, but something I've been reading a little bit about now is the correlation between gender identity and autism, which I find super interesting. There's some studies about that people in the autism. Oh, what do you call it?
Spectrum.
Yeah, thank you. The spectrum having a higher or more likely to have gender identity. Like, do you call it? Yeah, gender dysphoria. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm as a member of the ASD community, definitely on that
Yeah.
spectrum. I definitely agree with that. I was only talking the other day to my hairdresser actually about it because her daughter is autistic and is actually considering going through the trans experience and going through that journey. And as a parent, she was so distraught by it because it was like grieving, like losing, that part of her daughter. She hasn't started the progress yet, but I said to her, it's so common with people with autism because we just feel so alien to gender. It just doesn't feel right to us. We don't ever feel like a woman, and I don't ever really feel like either gender on any given day. So I can definitely relate to that struggle of waking up each morning and just having that attached to you, knowing you have to look a certain way to fit in a certain way. And as children, that can be such a tough time to go through. Definitely.
Yeah, and so when it comes to therapy, if you think you have a gender dysphoria or have some feeling of that, I definitely think it can be important to seek therapy and see if you're in this spectrum.
Mm.
And that is something you can find online.
Yeah, definitely. You can do a self-assessment. There's the AQ50 resources for that. And then after that, in terms of therapy, like Julie, I've been to people therapy as well as online therapy, and they've both been massively helpful to me. I've been very lucky with it. And I think it's always important to seek help where you need it, and whether that be through a close friend or professional help. It's really good advice, Chenko, so thank you.
Well, I want to pick up on that one. You said like, Chanko, um, you don't always need the therapy. Well, in Belgium, because I can only speak from Belgium, of course, you get assigned a psychologist. You cannot easily swap that person, because that person is linked to studies they did to actually help transgenders, but then they still feel very cold. So whether you need it or not, without that person, you cannot even start your transitioning, because if that person doesn't diagnose you with gender dysphoria, you are basically still stuck forever. If they don't think you're being legit or you are having gender dysphoria, you cannot even start transitioning, you know? So it is kind of weird, like, because some people do not need therapy. That's logical, but like, in Belgium, you are forced to go anyways. Like, how does forcing somebody to therapy actually help them along the journey? Because you're being forced to do something against your will. Like, I get it that they need a diagnose, but why afterwards still force them to go? Isn't that counterproductive?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of force in any way. But I think it can be important to do therapy anyway. Like if you decide to go further with the transition, I think that's important to go to a therapist anyway. But I don't agree with force. That is not okay.
Julie, it must seem like quite a barrier for that to be your first, step, is to have someone whose job it is really, who you feel it's to stop any kind of progress you make first, and make you talk to them and basically be evaluated by them for such a long time before you can move on. That must be quite a traumatic, block in your journey.
I mean, is it fun to go through that? No, because
Mm.
to start, you have to send an email to the hospital, because in Belgium you do it in the hospitals. Um, then they say like, okay, you have an appointment in 6 months. I do get the fact that you have to wait 6 months, because in that 6 months, if you're not really certain, you can always cancel it, which makes sense because some people do cancel out. But then you go there and then you talk about your past and all that stuff. That's the only time you actually talk about your past, in my experience. Then he's like, okay, we'll schedule a new appointment in 3 months. And then 3 more months gets added. Like, at that point, I didn't even know what to talk about anymore. Because from that moment, he only kept asking, how are you doing today? So I was more like, I don't trust this person. So how can I really open up to that person? Like, being forced to go, because that person decides whether you can go through or not. If that person says no, you don't get hormones. If that person says no, you can't do certain surgeries. Because for some surgeries, you do need approval of your therapist, which makes no sense in my opinion. Like, I got diagnosed the first meeting. He said it was a clear case of gender dysphoria. But then still I had to wait almost half a year 9 months to finally get a note that I'm okay to start hormones. Like, why does that person is so important to this entire process? Like, I get that they are there to support you and to help you, but I don't get it.
No, that
Yeah, that,
sounds very traumatic and claustrophobic in a way, since you want to change, but you need some other person to tell you if it's okay or not.
yeah, it must feel very, as you say, claustrophobic, trapping, because you're stuck in a position in a place where you don't feel comfortable within yourself whatsoever. And if you know, and they've told you that they know that it's a clear case, then why can't it be progressed a lot quicker than what it was? Julie, for people going through the same experience, about to reach out to people, hearing that can seem like a very scary thing. Like, oh gosh, I'm going to go and they're going to shut me down. It's going to take so long. What advice would you give to them in terms of coping strategies, any kind of resilience or methods they can, take to ease themselves into that process?
I can already say, like, every process is different. Like,
Mm.
the time wise, it will be very similar because they're not instantly going to be like, yeah, here's your form, here you go, hormones. No, in Belgium at least, it's like a path they have written down that you have to do.
Mm.
If you don't want to do that path, it's up to you, of course, but without the approval of the therapist, you cannot continue. Like, sure, if you're male to female, you can have a boob job without them actually needing to approve it. Like, that is always possible. But like for voice surgery to lose some parts you don't want, you need approval. Like the same for female to male, you need approval. You won't get hormones. Like, sure, you can lose your breasts. That's always doable. But like for the other steps, you always need approval. You want a big surgery done, you need approval. So it is a long journey, but if you really want this, you just gotta keep in mind that you just have to fight through it, Keep on finding motivation to do it, because in the end, it's your life, your happiness that you're fighting for. And I think Django kind of proved with that. Like, in the end, if you have to find a goal where you need to do it for, because your happiness, and especially as a psychology student, happiness is what we all fight for, right?
Yeah, definitely. Or have a feeling of well-being, which I like. If you're, of course, with the experience you have with the healthcare system, and of course in yourself as well. I assume you don't feel that well-being in yourself and also on the external.
Well, at the moment, I'm happier than where I started, but I do not feel like I am where I want to be at the moment. But that's because I'm being blocked by so many ways. Like, I've spoken before, not everything goes as it always was planned. Failed surgeries, things that happen during surgeries, like, but you have to keep going forward because you cannot give up if you want to be happy. Like, that's with anyone in life. Like, whether you're transgender or not, if you want something in life, you have to fight for it. If you want to be happy in life, you gotta make sure you know what you're up to and keep going forward, because, well, otherwise you'll end up in depression maybe. And then you will need therapy anyway to get out of it, so it's just a circle.
Yeah, it sounds like a cycle. It seems quite hard from an individual perspective. But Chenka, do you have any advice for, family and loved ones who might have somebody going through, a tough time with their mental health or going through the trans experience? What advice would you give to someone to support those people in their lives?
Hmm. Yeah. Something I got aware of while you were talking were that you said, um, let me know if I'm wrong, by the way. You said that you don't have to understand the situation, but you have to be open enough to like listen, and again, you don't even have to accept it, but like show empathy for the person experiencing this stuff. And that sometimes that is not that easy. But that is the advice.
Yeah, no,
Just
thank
listen openly.
definitely. Thank you. And Julie, did you have any feedback on what you would feel would be beneficial to you from family and friends when you were going through that initial, part of your journey?
Well, I can say one thing. Like, it wasn't always easy with my family when I came out as transgender. Like, it's a struggle you all have to go through. It's not only you that goes through it, it's your family, your brothers, your sisters, your mother, father, step, whatever that gets added to it. Your friends, they're all going through the same transitioning because you're part of not only your life but also their life. So you have to keep in mind that your mood swings also infect them. And trust me, hormones do give you a lot of mood swings. Like, we're all three women here, and I think you both can agree that a mood swing is not the most fun experience for you or the person around you. I think you can both agree with that one, right?
Yep.
So that is already very hard, especially in the beginning, since you start from very very little female hormones, because everyone has both hormones inside of their body, to suddenly an overflow of hormones. I remember the first couple of months where one day I was super happy and the next day I was super angry, super pissed. Nobody could talk to me. I just wanted to be alone. To an hour later be like the happiest person again. Like, you just have to be patient, because in the end, whether your family, friends, you gotta be patient. Like, during mood swings, well, just give somebody chocolates, that can already help you.
Or
That's
ice
the answer
cream.
to everything. Yeah, or ice cream.
But I was wondering, Julie, since transitioning must be super stressful too, do you think it has some, or maybe that also is the reason why your mood swings are so like severe? Because of like not only the hormones, but because the emotional reaction to it, or like, yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I get what you mean. Well, stress can be a factor, but I'm not somebody who cannot cope with stress. Like, I've always done jobs that are very stressful, even before coming out. So, I know how to deal with stress. And again, that's also something that's different for everybody on this planet. Like, you deal different with stress than I do. So, does it affect the mood swing? Yeah, but not everything has to do with stress. Like, you can wake up normally if you have slept, which in my case, when I started the hormones, that barely happened. Like, I became suddenly an insomniac, with most of the times just sleeping once or twice a week, and that was like 2-3 hours max. So stress is a factor, but I do believe that hormones are a bigger factor than the stress, in my case at least.
Thank you. No, that was very interesting because I was just wondering if, yeah, like you were saying too, that you felt this bigger change after taking your hormones, so that makes sense. Thank you.
No
Yeah,
worries.
definitely.
No worries at all. Because, like, I was already, like, a weak sleeper. But in my case, I think that's also why I became insomniac, because when I lay down, and this gonna sounds kind of weird, I felt movement inside of my body. And I know the movement inside of my body was caused by the hormones. Will every transgender feel the movements inside their bodies? Most likely not, but some might not. But it just, I think you just have to learn to deal with it.
Is that something your psychologist prepares you for, like that, those side effects or those potential experiences that people go through? And as well as that, I'm not aware too much of the process. Do the hormones reflect a woman's cycle? So do they fluctuate what they give you, or do they just give you an overdose of all of the hormones? Because I don't think I could handle that personally.
Well, you normally, if you're taking like the pill or birth control, you take one pill, right? If I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
Hmm.
Well, I take double the doses. I basically take double the hormones that you take to make the change. Does the therapist or psychologists guide you through that process? No, because they have never gone through it themselves. So how can somebody guide you through something that they have never experienced? Like Shenko said before, in the studies, transgender isn't often spoken about. So how can they guide you through something that nobody knows what's actually happening? Nobody knows what hormones will do to somebody's body. It could help somebody's body, but at the same time, it can destroy somebody's body. Like, there is no guidelines to what will happen.
Gosh, that must be so scary to not know, to kind of be the, the front line of, discovering what's going to happen, what the experience is going to be like. Has there been any data collection from the people that you've been getting your treatment from you? Have they asked you how you've reacted to the medication at all?
Well, each time you go to checkups, which is every 6 months, you're kind of like a test lab, a rat. You have to fill in stuff to see how your body changed and all that stuff to collect data. But like I said, every case is different. Like in my case, I can, because I am somebody who easily bruises. I could tap my arm now and it will become like a black spot, or however you call it. Like when you punch somebody, it becomes red and blue. Yeah, if I touch my arm, it will become like that. So I am very sensitive to moves. Not everyone will do the same way, So they cannot really collect all the data because every person is different. And just by collecting the data of 100, 200 people won't really give you a picture. They should do it worldwide instead of in one country, Because then at least you have the bigger picture to know the information, and then you can process that information, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Chenko, on that point, is there anything that you've come across in your studies in terms of if there's not enough data points, to look at the psychology of things? What is there a way scientists can avert this or go around this, or is that just a case of we have to wait for more data?
Oh, both. Yeah. Like the thing that we have been talking a lot about now when it comes to like anything psychology related and data is that when it comes to psychological knowledge, it's mostly studied like the people who are like doing the studies and also who are learning the studies are mostly like people from the West, and that is something that we need to think about too. But Julie is saying it needs to be worldwide. Worldwide, so I think it's important too. What was the other question you said? If you remember.
I talk so much, I ramble on, and then I forget what I've actually even said. Yeah, so data points, and if there's any way around it, if you have a limited amount of data, is there a way that you can approach that to sort of help that data set make sense?
I am actually not sure on this one.
Mm.
I think when it comes to transgender, even though it's not new, it's still fairly new in the way, or like in the case of science.
Mm.
So I think we need more science about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I do agree on that one. Like, people don't know a lot about it, that's also causing a lot of issues everywhere in the world. So people, since they don't understand what's going on, they cannot really do stuff about it. Like, society always judges. We all know that one. So because they are not aware of the situation, they can't really comprehend what's happening. Like, you can have a transgender male to female that is instantly looking feminine just by the way they're built, but then the opposite can happen as well, where it's super hard for that person to blend in because they're built in a specific way. But for example, and I'll take now for example Florida as a state with it, you can get arrested for going to the toilet as a transgender. Like, in my opinion, like, I go to the toilet to go to the toilet, you know? I'm not going to the toilet to take pictures underneath from people that are going to the toilets. Like, just because people are uneducated or not aware of what's happening, you create so much more drama and fuss about being transgender, which gives a lot of stress for both parties, both the transgender party and the, I will say, cis party. If that makes any sense. But yeah, it's something that needs to change, of course, because it makes both parties feel very shitty. Because as a transgender, you have to be careful to not get stabbed in the toilets out of self-defense, in a way, because people think you're there to groom them or you're there to assault them, while you're just going there to go to the toilets. So
Yeah.
there needs to be some way for both parties to understand the fact that not there will always be people that will claim they're transgender just to do it. Like, it's logical.
Yeah.
But not every person that does it is transgender. You have weird people in the world. Especially as a psychologist, you can confirm that not every person is the same. Not every person will do the same. So it's always something that needs to be balanced out. So, in my opinion, you cannot really judge a book by its cover. If that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good example because I was thinking it's I because of the lack of knowledge, like you're saying, I think people get a bit biased. Like they see a transgender person doing something and then they just assume that everyone is like that. Kind of like do you know the disorder schizophrenia? It has been like that for a long time. Like people assume that since there's one experiencing psychosis that might have hurt someone, they assume that okay, everyone with schizophrenia is dangerous. So I think it's so important to have the knowledge about everything, and like with this podcast too, spreading awareness, of course, but also like knowledge about what we've been talking about now, like hormones, how they work for your body, how the individual experience is with transitioning. So thank you so much for having this podcast. It's so important, more than you know.
Well, no worries. The goal about this podcast is indeed to give more information. Like, now we're talking more sometimes personal experiences and general experiences, but in the future we'll also talk about like laws and all that stuff to just spread more awareness for it, because we do not intend to do any harm. So that's the most important message we are trying to send out with the broadcast, like transgender people or even like non-binary people, because most of the times when you're non-binary, people put you on the same box as transgender because you don't really know where you fit in the gender spectrum. So they most of the times are put in one box. But both of the categories, let's call it categories, which is kind of a weird word to say or call people, but like, we are not here to take over the world or to be violent or spreads pictures of people on the toilet, you know. We are here because we want to be happy on our own. Like, I would be happy enough that people just leave me alone for my entire life if that means I could be happy and myself. And that's the same with most transgenders. Like, we just want to be happy, we just want to be free, you know. And in the end, I think that's the thing that everyone wants in their life. We all want freedom, we all want to be ourselves in whatever way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you all the time, Julie, you're so inspiring. And as you say, making noise and raising awareness and putting yourself out there, even though you would prefer, everyone leave you alone and you be happy. You're out here, on the forefront saying, actually, I need to share my story and I need to put myself in front of all of these people to so that people can understand, or at least try to understand what it's like. And the more noise we make, the more people might listen. And that might lead to what we were talking about before, medical, advances and research actually being made, because people start taking, it seriously, which it feels like in the past they haven't. So thank you both for such an enriching conversation. Chenko, your point of view, studying psychology, really, really added some depth to, Julie's experience. So I wanted to thank you both for being part of this conversation today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I do have to say, like, this conversation has been very important because your insights did enrich me a bit with how I can look at it differently. Like, if I had known some of what you said before, then things could have been different. So, yeah, I would like to thank both of you for being here today. So, because you have no clue how much it means to me that both of you are actually here today, since, well, as the host of this program, you never really know what you're dealing with. Like, we can invite people, the conversation can go one way, two ways. Like, but in the end, like, I try to help people, but at the same time, you are both helping me become a better person, if that makes any sense.
So kind, Julie. So kind.
Yeah, I think our time's up for today. We'll be we'll be back next week with another episode of Beyond the Binary. Thank you all for listening, and remember, you're not alone on this journey. Take care of yourself and others.